Okay, Cheryl, we are back. So just to let the listeners know, we had a little technological snafu where Cheryl and I got interrupted in mid-conversation from our last conversation. We reconnected and I forgot to hit record. So here we are, part two of our
Part
conversation.
two.
Well, part 2B, I guess. Part 2A was
Yes.
recorded.
Yes.
Part 2B. So we're going to try to link these conversations and make the whole podcast flow as best as possible. But if you're noticing that the sound is different or the conversation seems to be a little disjointed between the first half and the second half, that is why.
Yeah.
So welcome back, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to be here. I did, in preparation for this call, go back and re-listen to what we had talked about previously.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I wanted to circle back on was the idea of freedom. So you had mentioned early on how when you were a teenager, you felt like your parents had really just constrained you and all you really wanted was freedom.
Yeah.
And then you, of course, left your parents' home and then had to, support yourself and had, went through a difficult relationship process and realized how much freedom you had actually really had prior to all of this.
Right.
But I love the concept of freedom because I think it's actually really what we're all searching for our whole lives is freedom. And as adults, we will always have responsibilities of work or children or homes or caring for elderly parents or whatever it is that life brings our way. So how do we find freedom within that? And then do you think your definition or your concept of freedom has changed between when you were young and now?
Yes, definitely my concept of it has changed. My teenage concept was literally being able to do whatever I wanted to do it, when I wanted to do it, with who I wanted to do it. Right. Just very simple like that, like I just wouldn't have anybody to answer to. That was my definition of freedom. And then as I got older, even though I definitely had that ability, right, as a grown-up, that you do have that ability, I felt you feel constrained and not free by your responsibilities. And a lot of that is just a misunderstanding when you're young about, I always wanted to be a parent, I wanted to have children. That was always, you romanticize that, right? You see just, what's on television or in movies, but the reality of that is a lot of heavy responsibility. And it's just a mislabeling of your thinking. Also, I have definitely come to realize now, many years later, that these things that we go through, our life responsibilities, this external idea of freedom and the challenges we get to it are all there for very good reason. They're to push us inside, to push us back to figuring out where true freedom is. And that's an inside job. It's freedom from those thoughts that I'm not free, freedom from the pressure of always feeling like you have to do more, be more. All that's just, it's to push you back inside to hopefully realize how truly free we can be, when we stop being constrained by the material world. So that, yeah, definitely my ideas of freedom have really, really changed over the years.
I asked you that because you mentioned before, you said I had a bad partner picker and yes. I had to keep going through and learning this lesson again and again and again. And I think that I think that for most people, if they take a moment and they reflect back on their lives,
Mhm.
they will see certain trends in their
Oh,
lives. They'll
yeah.
see certain things that they're like, wow, this just keeps repeatedly showing up in my life. And I've, the question becomes why, right? I've had that
Right.
same question myself, like, oh my gosh, why does this keep circling? What are you trying to teach me, God? Like,
Right, right, right.
why does this keep swinging back at me, boomeranging back at me? And I think that is the lesson, right? So it's learning
Yeah.
to become free and see those things that are coming into our lives as opportunities, see challenges as opportunities to identify where we're not free, and then
Yep.
do the internal work to become free, regardless of what's going on outside of
Right.
us.
Yeah, I always say, like, when things like that happen, how's the yoga working? Right? Like, these things come into our lives to either polish us up or to show us where is the work still. And sometimes, in an instance in life where you have these things come around that you're like, oh my God, like, why always me? We can start to realize, well, maybe it doesn't really have very much to do with me at all. Maybe this is just somebody else's stuff I happen to have to be here for, but it's not really about me, and that frees you up just as much as if you can have that same kind of clear vision, when something happens to you for the third time, that you can probably say, well, no, I am the common denominator. I have
Mhm.
some work to do here,
Mhm.
but I can see it more clearly now, what needs to be done. And you start to disentangle yourself. In yoga, we call those our samskaras. These are little like seeds that are way deep in our subconscious. Some of them we planted ourselves there. Some of them happened in relationships, teachers. Some of them maybe came from previous lives. And they're always sprouting things like your personality traits, the way you act in relationships, the way you show up as an employee, how you treat your children. Um, and we don't even know they're there, right? And it's in this process of going within meditation, in particular, that maybe we start to get in touch with some of these things and weed these things out. That's how we really become free. We're so sometimes chained and locked up from the inside out. We assume it's an external problem. Really, it's an internal problem.
Yeah. So I see like two different things in what you said there. So one thing would be being able to identify when you do need to do the internal
Yeah.
work versus whatever is happening has actually nothing to do with me, even
Yeah.
though it may be happening to me, but it is because of the unresolved work that somebody else maybe in your life
Yes.
needs
Yes.
to
Yeah.
be doing. And they're,
Yeah.
they're pushing that out onto you, but it's really, you don't need to hold on to it.
No.
Don't need to take
No.
responsibility for it. You
Right.
don't need to carry it around
Yeah. You don't
because
need to fix it.
you don't need to, right, you don't need to fix it. No,
Right.
it is truly just a reflection of their pain that they're projecting onto you
Absolutely.
versus, your responsibility, which is always yourself, right? That's
Yeah.
really ultimately always our responsibility as ourself. And so how can you go a little deeper into, you touched on it, how
Yeah.
meditation helps us
Yeah.
to see
So
that
in
internal
both,
programming?
right. In both cases, you first have to go inside. You have to start to know who you are and what your habits are, what's on your loop, what's driving you. And meditation, we try to cultivate bare attention to just watching what is there. Some people are misinformed that meditation is about shutting down the thoughts in your mind and that there should be just like this void or quiet, while you're watching your thoughts. But that's a Herculean task. I don't even know if it's possible because when you're awake, The mind produces thoughts. It's the nature of the mind. It produces thoughts. Because we're generally externally facing creatures, that mental chatter goes unnoticed a lot of times when we're in our waking state looking out, but it's driving us. It's totally driving you. So in meditation, we go inside and we first just start to learn to watch. And sometimes I laugh now. Your brain says the craziest things. Your mind, it's, Michael Singer calls it the crazy neighbor upstairs. It never shuts up, and it has something to say about everything. And I'm amazed sometimes, driving down the street, like literally something from third grade will pop into my head, and you get that whole emotional response to it. And if you're unaware of that, you've got these emotions built up. I might take the next person's head off, right? I might take the next thing very personally. It might make me upset because I'm already upset by something that happened 45 years ago, right? So in meditation, we learn to see these patterns in ourselves. And, there's just something about being aware of your own stuff or your own patterns or the own things that have kind of implanted in your subconscious that starts to take away their power. Right. So you get, like, even if it's just like half a second more or a second more of time before your reaction. Because when it's something external that's happening to you, somebody comes up and you get that feeling they've said something or done something, you get that from feeling. But because you've been practicing seeing your stuff, that initial feeling, you get a feeling, you get a moment of discernment. What's this about? Did something get triggered inside of me that's my stuff? Right? I have to own, or is this one of those scenarios where somebody's suffering themselves and they touched upon something in me that we're mirrors for each other, but that's not really about me, right? So that's kind of the practice of it. It sounds almost so boring, that I think a lot of people get turned off by it, and so almost new agey, kitschy, like how the heck could that work, right? Me just sitting with my thoughts, but anybody that I talk to that has spent any time trying to do it, we all seem to say the same thing. Have a lot more peace. I have a lot less conflict. I don't get pushed and pulled around through my life so much like I used to. So, and you've got 5 to 10,000 years of Vedic teachings and the recordings of sages and saints that all say, come this way. Yeah. I say, if life's really hard, if you're feeling like, why always me? Why does this keep happening? I think it's like a blaring neon sign. Go within. Stop looking to blame everybody else. Stop looking to make everything else the cause. And go back to your causal self.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I remember part of, and you can probably tell me where this comes from because I don't remember exactly the origin, but there's something that says don't take anything personally, right? Isn't that part of that was part of like our
Don Miguel Ruiz, the 4 agreements.
You can't take anything personally. And when I first read that, I had a very strong reaction to that, thinking, what are you talking about? Like, of course, I mean, if I'm not doing anything wrong and someone comes up to me and starts yelling at me or calling me names or whatever the case may be, of course I'm going to take that personally. I think that's most people's probably reaction if they were to read that. But then it requires a deeper understanding. So the more you meditate and the more that you get to know the crazy neighbor upstairs, as you call him or her, and you see that constant nonstop stream of thoughts and opinions and judgments and, categorizing as good or bad or right or wrong, then you can see how we all make judgments,
Yeah.
but we can learn to recognize when we're doing it and to not take things
Right.
personally, right? So either this is this person's work that they need to do, so I should not take it personally because it's not about
Mhm.
me, it's about the work they need to do, or it's about the work I need to do, but I don't need to have a judgment about that. I can just
Yeah.
recognize it and accept it
Mhm.
and do the work that I need to do.
Right. Right.
So I think
Yeah,
that's
it's just,
amazing.
you want to, you're trying to just look for just a smoother path, not kind of the middle way. They call that in Buddhism, where, I'm not constantly pulled between the highest high and the lowest low, that I can kind of be in the middle, taking it all in,
Mhm.
you know. And, Don Miguel Ruiz, he says, even if someone's calling you like the most vile names, or, really saying something, it's really not about you. And that, man, that's a tough one to sit with at first.
It is. And
That's a really
I
good
think,
book. Those four agreements is a really good
yeah,
book,
really
because it
good.
really does challenge your perceptions. The other one that um really stuck with me from that one is the doing every day, just do your best.
Mhm.
No, I was always trained, your best is like A+ every day. Right. And Don Miguel Ruiz says, no, like some days you might be tired, some days you might be sick. So it's literally do your best that day. And I think that's really powerful if you can bring that into this whole idea of, some days it's a little easier to do this work, a little easier to be self-aware and trying to transcend and see the good in everyone and love everyone. And then other days, something broke, the car broke down, you got yelled at by your boss, the kids did something crazy, and your window of tolerance is like this big. And so your best looks a little different that day, you know. But that's
Yeah.
also a self-awareness thing, a realization of like what is happening inside and outside, that comes
Mhm.
from meditation. And so, I find to beat myself up less for being human.
Which is huge. You're basically
Yeah.
saying, I give myself permission to be human, right? I give
Yeah. Little
myself
grace.
permission and grace, yes, to have
Mhm.
days maybe that are a little rough. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, I say, well, I did the best I could for today.
Right.
And I see, where I maybe could have made different choices. And I wish I had, but I'm only human.
Mhm.
And tomorrow's
Yeah.
a new day.
Yep.
Yeah. And when
Absolutely.
someone, I think, just circling back to whether, it's your stuff or somebody else's stuff, I think that we all have these things inside of us that we can rub up against, and they're prickly,
Mhm.
they're,
Yeah.
you want to react to them. And usually if someone says or does something to me, and I know with 100% certainty that that is not true, it does not bother me at
Yeah.
all. It doesn't bother me at
Right.
all. But if it's something that maybe internally I'm struggling with, because
Mm.
something from my childhood, some programming I have going on
Yeah.
inside, there's some part of me is identifying some truth to their statement or to their action, well, then I get much more defensive and riled, right?
Right.
So that's really great with that internal work, because you can say, oh, that's really upsetting me or offending me,
Right.
because
Wow. Like, what's this
inside,
feeling?
right, I'm really
Yeah.
like thinking this about myself, I guess. Oh, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, okay. I need to do a little, deep dive on that situation. And again, it's not about them. It's
Mhm.
about, now we're
Yeah.
back to me again, right? They may have
Yes.
lashed out at me because of whatever their unresolved issues were, but if it's triggering me, now it's back to being about me, because
Yeah.
something they
And
said,
yeah.
yes,
Yep.
rubbed me the
Exactly.
wrong
Very,
way.
very true.
Yeah.
You're not going to escape the work on this planet. Like, it's going to come at you one way or the other. There's no way that I've found, certainly, to remain in this world and completely transcend those kind of interactions. They happen all the time, all the time. But you have to have a way to clean these things up, to come to like the end of your day and just kind of process it and do what you just said. I did my best today, where I could, I showed up and I did the work, and where I couldn't, I see that now. Or whatever it is, the conversation that you have with yourself to try to clean up the strands of your day. And sometimes we do our best, that they just have to, the day ends there and tomorrow we start a new day, right? And we try again the best the other day. But some days too, like, I find what's helped me in my interactions with people and in myself is to clean things up, right? Especially with the people I care about. If I have had, like, one of my kids has said something, my reaction was like not what I would have hoped it would be. And maybe in that moment, I didn't show up the best that I could have if I'd had, like, a good night's sleep or something like that. I go back and I try to clean it up. Like, hey, that was me. Because, like, I want to also, especially with where my children are concerned, or the people I really care about, for sure, or that care to hear me talk, is I want to show them what it looks like to say, hey, I lashed out on you, and that wasn't about you. I was feeling bad inside and I took that out on you. Or, what you said triggered me, but that was my responsibility to deal with it. I'm sorry that I spilled on you a hurt that I've been carrying. I think that's a huge thing we can do when we're also doing that work, trying to show other people, what does the internal, external kind of thing look like in exchange, in relationship with each other, how we can help each other that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it shows a lot of compassion for the other person and compassion for yourself. And it gives them the, and again, we come back to freedom, because all this is about freedom, but yeah, it gives them the freedom now when they have a day that's maybe not so great, to not beat themselves up and to come back to you and say, "Ooh, that was a rough one. I'm sorry." And they know that you'll be open and loving and receptive to whatever they have to say, because now you've established that type of trust relationship between the two of you, which
and to me, this is freedom.
Yeah.
When I have the freedom to be myself, that it's sometimes messy, but I know that I'm around people that I can clean that up with. Not that I abuse it, right? Not that I abuse it, but I can really be in relationship with people that allow me to grow and learn. That's freedom. Not how much money's in my bank account, not how many trips I've planned this year, not the car I drive, none of that, none of those things. Do I get to show up and be me? That is freedom.
Yeah. Which actually transitions beautifully into another question I wanted to ask you, which is, how do you see the difference between joy and happiness? Do you classify them as different? Do you see them as the same?
I don't really classify them as different. I think they're both our default states. But I think maybe a little bit bad definitions for them, thanks to like Hallmark and the Lifetime channel. To me, in my study and in my experience, it's just really a being at peace. Certainly we have these moments in life where they're celebratory, and they produce a real kind of uplifting kind of feeling. But real true joy, real true bliss that's sustainable is to me more in line with like that loving vibration. Like just not a feeling that's like this, it's just unsustainable to maintain, right? It's just a comfortable, loving vibration is the best way that a peace in your heart, a comfortable, feeling comfortable in your own skin. But definitely love.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And to me, I guess I would call that joy. And I would call what you're saying, like, you're celebrating something and you're really happy about it, or you buy a new car and you're really happy about it, or you plan that trip and you're really happy about it. But happiness, joy, I feel like you can have joy and be sad at the same time, right? We can hold both of those together. It's not an either or, it's a yes and. Where happiness, it's hard to be happy and sad at the same time.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
So
such a neat thing about emotions. There's so many shades of them. And we try to use these words as best we can to capture feelings, and how I can definitely see what you're saying as ways of kind of defining those couple of things. I definitely feel those.
And being able to recognize it in the moment, I think, is a really beautiful thing, because sometimes when we are going through really challenging times, if we're focusing solely on whatever those things are in our lives that we would not prefer and that we're struggling with, if we can recognize that we can still feel love and peace and joy despite those things, or at the same time as those things, I think that's really freeing, right? I don't have to just be sad, angry, frustrated. I can be those things. We're human. We're all going to have emotions, right? But I can also hold joy at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of one of the things that we do in Yoga Nidra is practice holding opposites, right? So that we can promote equanimity. Possible to move through opposite emotions and kind of balance the brain, but also in Yoga Nidra helps prep us for a state that goes beyond, it's not even a state, it's a place that goes beyond our deep sleep consciousness. It's called Turiya. It's the place in my mind that the power of opposites falls away. So above samadhi, liberation. So it practices us for finding that state in meditation and being able to stay with it. To have equal vision kind of deal. And I think that too, in meditation, like people expect that when they reach enlightenment, they get liberated. It's like we say, right? Samadhi is bliss, or, there's going to be fireworks or some deal. But I think from what I study and what I experience, that it's a more peaceful kind of being, so it's good practice in our waking lives to know that we can hold competing things, and the ability to hold competing things is joy. Is joy.
And just to clarify for people who are listening, the idea of equanimity, is that similar to what you would say you called earlier the middle path, where your emotions are, you're not up high, you're not down low, you're just kind of coasting somewhere in between.
And you're more able to like see what really is then. from that kind of place. Sometimes we call that the seat of the witness, right? At the soul level. But joy, I guess you have to think about, and maybe that's something really worthy of contemplation, is that difference between joy and happiness, and getting clear on what your default nature is.
And I think, you know, we all do have a default nature. And so kind of like our weight, you know, like everybody kind of has a default weight, right? So sometimes
Yeah,
you're going to diet, you're going to lose a little weight, or maybe you went on vacation, you
yeah,
gain a little weight. But kind of your body wants to rest around this certain weight, whatever it is for your particular
right,
body.
right.
And I think that we have default emotions too. Like each of us has an emotion that when we're not really paying attention to our lives, we're not paying attention to that inner dialogue that's going on,
Yeah,
we default to it. So it could be sadness, it could be anger, it could be frustration, it could be happiness, could be. I
mhm,
think a lot of times for a lot of people, it tends to be a little more on the negative side when we're not paying attention. And
yeah.
so having that awareness of what your default emotion is, recognizing it, seeing it for what it is clearly, and then making a conscious choice to change our thought patterns to produce a different emotion
So very
is.
interesting. I mean, this is samskara,
Mhm.
right? So would want to clarify. That would be your emotional pattern that's externalizing. I say is not your default emotional state. That's driven by your samskaras. Every self with a capital S, their default emotion state is joy or bliss. How you can intellectualize that, I don't know if it's even possible without having a direct experience really that way. But what you're talking about, in my estimation, are what I would call departure points for self exploration. So if I noticed that I am always going to the negative, if I notice I get angry very easy, that's a direct highway to go to a samskara. That is something definitely to look at. There is something there. And I can maybe meditate using traditional like Vipassana insight meditation just to try to stay with that and see what's really there. Use a practice like Yoga Nidra to explore that. Um, and they're real gifts. If you could start to see those things as gifts, you really can start to burn those things off. And then your true nature is not as clouded over. So you know the koshas, right? That we learned, right? Food body, pranayama kosha, the mind kosha, wisdom kosha, then bliss, right? We get to
Mhm.
covers the soul. All these things, anger, that thing that happened to you in third grade, the person that cut you off, those get planted in the bliss layer. And, enough of that happens, it's covering over the bliss, right? Is covering over the bliss layer is lit by your soul. So the soul is pure joy, pure love, pure bliss. The next covering over covers that. When that gets really opaque, no wonder everything coming out is negative, right? That it's filtered by that. So that's what we're trying to do. It's like, I notice like I get triggered every time this happens. Let me go back to that. Now I cleaned off the window a little bit there. And if I can keep going back and I can polish that bliss layer back up, now my true nature is shining through a little bit more easily.
Yeah, that's a beautiful explanation. Beautiful explanation. And I think what happens with meditation is it's a little bit more of a direct highway to
Yeah.
accessing the soul.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then over time, if you can learn to sit and access that space while you're sitting in quiet and peaceful
Yeah.
contemplation, then you can start recognizing the things that need to be cleaned up, and then in the physical world be cleaning those up. And then
Yeah.
being over time, as you're saying, you clean the window and you clean it a little bit more and you clean it a little bit more. And before you know it, I shouldn't say before you know it, this is a lifetime process. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't act like that. It's a quick fix.
Right.
It is not.
Because women can lose some scars all the time.
Right. Absolutely. But over time and with practice, you will notice that you can access that soul, that light, that inner peace much more easily than you were able to do it before. Which brings us back to freedom.
It does. It really does. And it really does redefine that. It's interesting. I try to tell people, like, there's just nothing extraordinary about me, special about me. I'm the same as everybody else. I've had some really difficult things happen in my life, not unlike everybody else. And this has really helped me. Really, really helped me. Right before I was ready to come back, not even right before I was ready, I didn't even know I was ready to come back. But I had gone to the doctor, he was ready to put me on Prozac, and I went to my first yoga class in, like, I don't know, many years, because I had a ton of kids. And it just didn't take long for this stuff to work. And it wasn't like first day in, I had all the tools and, I was levitating off my mat, or it was really just one day showing up to my mat and then the next day doing something else. And it just, as much as I gave to it, it gave it back. And, you spend a little more time doing this and another insight opened up. And it was so subtle in the beginning. I mean, it really took some time for I realized, oh my God, life's not as hard. I mean, it is as hard. Still dealing, with husband being deployed to Iraq, and my best friend was killed in a motorcycle accident, like really heavy things. But I don't want to walk into traffic, and I'm not taking off everybody's head around me. I'm functional, and I can be happy even when things are really heavy.
Yeah.
Without guilt.
Without guilt, which is another huge emotion I think we all carry around. Yeah. How can I be happy if this is going on? How can I be happy if my loved one is sick, or, there are people in the world that are suffering? How can I be happy? And I think especially as women, we carry that. It seems that women carry that more than men. And it's very heavy. It's something that I've struggled with myself. And especially if you're just naturally an empathic, sensitive person, you do feel like, well, why do I get to be happy? Why do I get to have this life if other people don't? And so how do you reconcile?
Right. Well, have you ever been like in a conversation with a group of people and it's like, let me one up you on how hard my life is? Do you dare say, well, I'm actually doing pretty good? Right? You'd feel terrible. You're like, oh my God, these people are, I don't want to tell them I'm great. So you're right. Like that pull to the negative, to complain, to lament. And some things are very worthy of being upset about, uptight about, worrying about. But we very rarely talk about our joys. And if someone does, they're bragging. Look at them showing off with their happiness. Right? Don't they know I'm miserable? Right? So it's tough. It's tough sometimes to be a light.
It is. And that's I guess where I come back to is that we can only control what we can control.
Yeah.
Right. So I would love to, make sure that there was 0 starving children in the world and there was never another war and, no one ever died of another illness. Clearly those things are out of my control and I only have control over me. So finding another way of finding peace is finding our own gifts and talents and using them to make the world a better place.
And that can happen just one interaction at a time.
One interaction. Yes.
You never know where your influence ends. I think Ben Franklin said that of teachers. Like, no one knows where the influence of a teacher ends, something like that, he said. But that's true of all of us. That random conversation you have with a stranger on the bus or at Starbucks while you're waiting for your coffee, you just don't know how that could touch someone. So it's worth the effort, in my opinion.
I agree. It's like ripples in a pond, right? Because if you touch that one person and they get filled up from that, they experience, peace or love or acceptance, and then they touch the next person, and that just keeps rippling outward.
Yeah, and it makes you feel better too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But perfection, probably not going to happen. We just keep showing up every day and doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
I know, you get to see it too. People come into the studio and they're there to work out. And then before you know it, they're meditating. And before you know it, they're trying something else. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I guess I do want to emphasize that it really is the experience that is most important. So you and I can have this conversation all day long, and it's a great conversation and people can learn from it. But you have to have the experience to truly know what we're talking about here. Yeah.
And yoga insists on that. Yoga is not dogmatic. It is a practice of direct experience. The philosophies, the Indian philosophies insist on rigorous debate, on personal experience. They ask no one to take anything on faith. You must have the experience yourself. You can't emphasize that enough, actually.
Yeah.
You and I are here to say it works. For us, it works. There are many paths up the mountains. The people that listen, they might find a different way. All valid. There's a guru, Ramana. Oh God, his name's gonna go out of my head. Ramakrishna. There's a book called The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna that I highly recommend. He was, he lived in the late 1800s, maybe one of the last incarnations of Vishnu, Krishna, to come back, I believe is what they say. And he practiced all things. He practiced Christianity, he practiced being a Muslim, he practiced being a Christian, Tantra, a Bhakti, all these things, and he would become enlightened. And he was a universalist. He said that all paths are valid. They all lead to the same place. We're all going to the same place. So you have to make room for people to get there in their own way too.
Absolutely.
And I always say you can't proselytize yoga. You feel so great and you're like, oh my God, I just want everybody that I love to feel better. Come to yoga. It doesn't work like that in yoga. You have to, when you're ready, you go. And you could be there 2 years, you just go for the asana. And then one day the teacher says something and you're like, huh,
Yeah, it really is like that. It really is like, huh. and then 10 other teachers could actually have said the exact same words. And you did not go, huh.
Yeah.
In fact, you maybe didn't even hear it because you were somewhere in your head not paying attention, right?
Yeah.
Yes. What is the expression? When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
It's true.
And it's
I have
so
students
true.
who come up to me and say, "Oh my God, you said this thing tonight, and that is just what I needed to hear. Nobody's ever said it that way." I've been said, and I know I've said it like 15 million times. That's how it works.
That's how it works. Yeah. Well, then let's talk about some of the things that have particularly worked for you. So your practices that you maybe use on a daily basis that keep you grounded, keep you moving along this path.
Number one thing for me is the Maha Mantra, which is the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's always in my head. I list as soon as I get up in the morning, that goes on my stereo. So that is one of my biggest regular practices. I read scripture. I try to do it every day if possible, read some scripture.
And scripture from where? Where are you reading?
Like Mandukya Upanishad, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. I'm reading a book by Graham Schweig right now on the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, or I read part of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So they're hardcore part of my practices. I try never to go a day without those things.
And are these things hard to understand? So, a lot of people will be listening to you, the words coming out of your mouth and not understanding a single thing that you are saying.
Yes, they are.
So is it like trying to sit down and read the Bible, which I tried to do years ago and was very ineffective at?
I try to find teachers to help me understand. It's slow going. This is not a book you read in 2 nights. So maybe one day it's just a passage, and I just try to let that sit with me. The more you do it, the easier it gets. I love the chanting for sure, and singing kirtan. I love that. They soothe my soul. Absolutely soothe my soul. I read a book very recently that really was so good for me. It was called The Journey Home by Radhanath Swami, about his life and how he came to be on the spiritual path as a seeker. Fantastic. Highly recommend that. I read a lot. And then the other things I do is meditate. Teaching for me is a part of my practice. Practicing yoga when I get to. Doing the asana part, pranayama, breath work, so good. But yeah, my biggest things, like the things every day, are chanting and reading, which is funny, right? For a lot of people would think, well, don't you practice yoga every day, like the physical part of it? Sometimes that, if I'm having a good week, I get that every day, but it's the food for my mind, which ultimately, hopefully, gets to my soul. That's most important.
All right. Those are all fantastic.
Yeah.
And then the last question I guess I will ask you is, we talked about this, unfortunately, last time it got cut off, so I will ask you again. But at Balance Planet Yoga, which is the studio that you co-own with your daughter Jenna, you guys have made a very intentional choice to make that studio a community and not just a studio, a place where people feel like they have a home. It's a home outside of their home. They have friends, they have close relationships, they feel safe to be themselves and to show up as themselves, whatever that may mean for that particular day. Sometimes it's a good day and sometimes it's not, and both are welcome and accept it with love. So I guess, why did you make that choice? Because I think that it's a little bit more work on your part.
Yeah, for sure. I love people. I really do. Like I just feel so pulled to love and serve people. And I really am one of those people that just believe that love can change the world, and um I don't know, it's such a pull from my heart. And I know Jenna's the same way. Um, I'm genuinely love everyone that comes in those doors. And some people don't get to experience that on the daily. They don't have that kind of love in their lives, and they're so worthy of it. And if you can show people that, maybe, it's just contagious. Love's just as contagious as hate, maybe more. So if I can just be a small part of creating a little place where love's the cool thing, accepting people is the cool thing, wherever they are, however they look, um, getting people to see the light that's in everyone. I want to make that cool.
Yeah. Which you also mentioned the last time we spoke, how, people want to quit their corporate jobs or their day jobs or whatever, and become just a guru or I don't know,
Yeah.
yoga teacher or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But what value it is to stay in those positions if you love them and if they bring you joy, and
Be a
take
yoga
this,
teacher there.
take these practices there.
Yeah, my mentor, I did that quite a few years ago now. I remember lamenting to him. I said, I have these golden handcuffs,
Yeah.
and I just want to go teach yoga all the time. And I just remember him looking at me, and he said, Cheryl, what makes you think that yoga only happens in a yoga studio? You're a yoga teacher everywhere you go. Don't you think those people going through divorces need yoga?
Mhm.
And I was like, it changed my life.
Yeah.
Changed my total perspective. And so I remember I'm not just a yoga teacher at Balanced Planet Yoga. I have that ability to bring those teachings and those philosophies everywhere I go,
Mhm.
and
And that,
hopefully bring the temperature down
yeah.
wherever I go.
Yeah, it's a presence, because when you take those philosophies and teachings and you really internalize them and they become just part of who you are, it's something that people just can feel when they're around you. It is in what you say and what you do, but it's also, I think it's
Yeah.
almost more just in your overall presence.
I mean, energy is real, and we
Yeah.
all give off energy. And you've met people that give you that little feeling in your tummy. You're like, and you also meet people, and it's like you've known them your whole life.
Mhm.
Right. So we all have this ability to manage our energy and the energy that we give off. And that's, what are you feeding your energetic body?
Yeah. Fantastic. Let me see if I have anything else for you. Okay, one last question. If there
Okay.
was anything you could tell your younger self, what would it be?
We're going to be okay.
Hmm.
We're going to be okay. It's all worth it.
Yeah, I think that's a message we can keep telling ourselves over and over, right? We're going to be okay. Actually, we already are okay.
Yeah.
Right?
You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
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 Can't take out one piece. You don't get to be who you are. If you really love who you are right now, you have to love everything that made you up.
Mhm.
And that's really the work, to love who you are.
Yeah.
And and it is about integrating all those pieces in, just what we've been talking about this whole time is, how do I clean things up in here? And the result of that is you really start to love yourself, and you're comfortable in here.
Which brings us back to freedom.
Freedom. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Beholden to nothing, beholden to no one.
Mhm. Yes,
That's freedom for sure.
it truly is. Truly is. And it's the work. It's the work that we
Yeah,
do every
it is.
day. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being
You're so welcome,
here.
love.
And although, I feel bad we had our technical difficulties, it allowed me to spend a little more time
I
chatting with
know.
you,
I
so
feel
I
the
can't
same
complain.
way. I feel the same way. Always a
And
pleasure.
always a pleasure. And I will see you at the studio soon.
Sounds good, babe. Have a great
All right.
weekend.
You too. All
I
right.
love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.